All right. Good to see you all on this Tuesday. Think I've got everybody. A few people not here. We'll see if they come later. Anyways, I'm going to talk about this gentleman, Venerable Alphonse Gallegos. Well, Alphonse Gallegos. Why am I talking about him? Why am I talking about him? Miss Villa, why am I talking about Venerable Alphonse Gallegos? What might be the purpose, huh? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, he's important. Yeah. Have you ever heard of him before? Yeah, so he's somewhat important. Let's qualify that. Yes, Easter Hinkle, because it is Hispanic Heritage Month, right? So I'm honoring American Catholics who are on their way to sainthood. And unlike Junipero Serra, he's definitely American. He was born in the United States of America, not what became the United States. 1931 to 1991. Born in 1931. He died in 1991. He was from Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was born in New Mexico, which is one of the U.S. states. Although 1931. Mexico still a territory? I guess was it a state yet?
Pretty sure it was.
You think so? Look it up for me, sir. I'll give you an extra credit point. I just want to make sure because a little bit because I know Hawaii wasn't yet, and Alaska I don't think was a state yet. But yeah,
1912.
oh, it did. Okay, good. Um, New Mexico. So an American citizen, definitely. And as you can see from, or maybe you can infer from his outfit here, the hat, the staff, the shepherd's staff. He was a Catholic bishop. Um, he was in holy orders and eventually was ordained a bishop, an auxiliary bishop of Sacramento in California. So he, hopped from New Mexico over to California. An auxiliary bishop, well, the word auxilium in Latin just means to help. So basically, a helper bishop. What did you get, by the way? Did you get something nice? Oh, just popcorn? Mm. Not caramel corn, just regular popcorn? Tasty. Mom loves popcorn. Make it for her all the time. Anyways, so he made his way somehow. He got over to California and he became a helper bishop, an auxiliary bishop. You have the main bishop of a diocese. You had the main bishop of Sacramento in California, the Diocese of Sacramento. And then he might have other men who are also bishops, but they serve him to help him in his duties. Sometimes the church just gives it away as a gift. It's like your parting gift on a game show or something. Well, Bob's been a priest, a good priest, for so many decades. I'll just slip his name into the list of bishops. And Bob becomes an auxiliary bishop. Some dioceses have them, some dioceses don't. I think Philadelphia does, the Archdiocese. Newark has is known for having a ton of auxiliary bishops. For what reason, I don't know. Other dioceses just have the one bishop. Technically, there's only one bishop for a diocese. But anyways, he was ordained a bishop, a helper bishop of the Diocese of Sacramento in the early 80s. And he was known as the Bishop of the Barrios. The Bishop of the Barrios. He would hang out in the neighborhoods. I guess barrio is a nice word that comes from Spanish for ghetto. The slums where all the poor people are. So that's where he would go. And he would minister especially to gang members. So yeah, he would show up not dressed like this, but sometimes he'd dress up in a sombrero hat and stuff like that, in a t-shirt. Hey, what's going on? Shoot anybody today? Good, good, good. Jesus loves that, Don't shoot anybody. Love your enemies, right? So, but he was minister, which I can imagine was quite hard work. And he is Hispanic, so he's not appropriating culture. The sombrero, he's legit. Okay, so I mean, anyways, so as a priest and as a bishop, he did this. What else do we got? And he worked, yeah, in Los Angeles and Sacramento. Somehow he got down. Sacramento is in the north, but somehow I guess he got down to L.A. and continued his work of working amongst the poor. Excuse me. I got to figure out some way how to, because I got my alarm here, so I know when I need to stop. But I keep getting stupid. Like bang, counselor, hey, how's it going? They all want to send me stupid messages telling me you have an appointment tomorrow. Well, thank you, but I'm busy right now. Okay. And he apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently from this article, he had bad eyes. He's wearing eyeglasses, so you can tell he had some kind of eye disability, but apparently he had poor eyesight and stuff like that, so he suffered from that. And unfortunately, in 1991, he did not die a natural death. Apparently, he was run over by a car. Someone ran the good old bishop down. Hopefully, it wasn't one of those low riders, you know, in the barrio. Yeah. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, wait, did we hit something? Yeah, Bishop Gallego! Hit Bishop Gallegos, man, yeah. But that's how he died. So they opened up apparently he's a very good and holy man. And so he's at that second stage, and now he's venerable, so he can be officially in some form venerated by the church. I don't know which diocese would have, I'd have to look up the details to see which diocese opened up his cause, whether it was LA or Sacramento or New Mexico for that matter, out in Albuquerque. But nevertheless, his cause has been open, and that's where he is for now. So I ask, you know, Venerable Alphonse, for your prayers for us during Hispanic Heritage Month, for peace, and that you will pray for us and pray for, well, people in California and New Mexico, where you were from, that they will be blessed by God and live peaceful and happy lives. So, and pray for us in this class that we'll do well. Amen. Reporting. Where are we? Writing. What is writing? We're still on what is writing. Well, of course, it's about writing. So makes sense. Excuse me. What is writing? Where did I end? Abjad. Yes. I was thinking I was going to starting to go into the history of writing. Alphabet, abugida, abjad, yes. That, yes, yes. And here we obviously cats can't write, but for some reason my cat always likes to sit on the keys of the screen, you know. And I would come, not the current one, but I had another one. She's dead, unfortunately. The sweetest cat you'd ever meet. She used to sit on there, and I'd come back and I'd find like my Word document open, but it'd be like one W going over for like 50 lines, you know. I'm like, I didn't write that. Sally. She must have been on the keyboard. I don't know why. I'm not sure I want a cat's butt on my keyboard that I'm going to be touching. Well, thanks, cat. Anyways, well, that's all right. Cats keep themselves clean, pretty much. The history of writing. Yes. According to our friend, Florian Kolmas, in his article, or book chapter or something that hopefully you've taken a look at or read, Writing Systems, an introduction to their linguistic analysis. Writing is three things: rooted in pictures, ultimately rooted in pictures. Number one, first bullet point. Second bullet point, writing has originated several times in human history. Okay, it wasn't just one place that writing came out of. It came out in several places independently or semi-independently, some places. And it has, and I just told you, it's emerged in different places. So several times in history, not just at one time, and in several different places on the planet. So I have 3 points, but actually my notes, it's 3 points on the PowerPoint, but 2 points on my notes or something. But I mean, as with anything from the ancient world, Ms. Prawl, we don't know much. We know a lot, I think, more than we did a century ago, and I'm sure in another century from now we'll know a lot more about the past. But, you know, historiography, the writing of history, graphe, yes? Writing, grapho in Greek. Historia, story. The writing of stories and the writing of the history of writing itself is still, quote, according to Florian Kulmas, full of holes and ragged spots waiting for reconstruction. Okay? So, what I'm going to give you about the history of writing, what I'm summarizing for you from my own reading on the history of writing, you know, you have to remember even the scholars and the linguists who focus on this have to admit that there's a lot we don't know about it. And a lot we have to kind of, as he said, reconstruct. Just a fancy scholarly term of saying, Miss Crystal, make it up. Shh. Not supposed to know how the sausage is made. Historical imagination. It's another phrase that we use in academia. Use your historical imagination. What do you think happened? I can think many things. Okay. According to our reading from Florian Kulmas, there are 3 issues that we could look at or can look at in the history of writing. Let me see if I put it on the PowerPoint. Yeah. How did it come into existence? How did it come into existence? How did it develop? And then finally, how did it spread? How did it spread? So those are the three divisions of my talk, okay? First, I'll start with how did writing come into existence? Okay, how did pictures become writing? And then how did writing, how did it develop into writing from just drawing pictures? And then how did this technology spread throughout human beings, human cultures? So coming into existence, writing appears very late in the history of Homo sapiens, us, okay? Or at least our variety of Homo sapiens. Technically, I think we're called Homo sapiens sapiens, knowing humans who know. Sapiens sapiens, yeah. Because there are other different varieties of Homo sapiens, like I think maybe I mentioned these, Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, Australopithecus, Homo habilis, stuff like that. Well, maybe Homo habilis wasn't a Homo sapien, but anyways, closely related. But for us, for our flavor of Homo sapiens, we developed writing very late in our existence, only about 5,500 years ago in the existence of human beings. Compared to what scholars think, our existence has been that the first Homo sapiens emerged, we clearly had a primate develop that was not like the other primates at the time. It was us. It was clearly one of us. And not, something else, some other type of monkey or something different. That probably happened about 300,000 years ago, give or take 100,000 years. A safe bet would be to say at least 100,000 years ago, but given things that archaeologists have been finding and paleontologists, those who study the ancient world, palaios in Greek means ancient or old. So those who study ancient things like dinosaurs and stuff like that, they're still digging up skulls and stuff like that are pushing the years back. So maybe as far ago as 300,000 years ago, and that's the number I'm going to go with. But whether it's 100,000 or 300,000, still 5,500 is not that much in that time frame. Not very long. It's quite recent. And as far as scholars can tell, I've mentioned this several times before, but I'll mention it again. It seems that writing grew out of our proclivity to draw pictures. To draw pictures. You know, that was another thing that defined us as Homo sapiens. That, you know, I know we're like, what is it, like one gene removed from chimpanzees, I think. I think chimpanzees are our closest relative. Maybe. So that's a sobering thought, isn't it, Ms. Taylor? Chimpanzee. And yet, chimpanzees don't draw, but we do. We draw. As far as we know, no other animal draws. Takes a tool and starts drawing images of the trees or the bananas or the ocean or other animals, you know? It grows out of drawing. What is drawing? Well, here it is. From Old English, Mr. Wojciechowski. Yes, sir. Old English. Dragon or dragon. Probably, I guess it would be pronounced dragon. To drag, which we still have in English. Okay, I love it when Old English words persist in our English language. To drag something. To pull towards. Anyone who's painted, you kind of know that's kind of like the technique of what you're doing in painting. You're like pulling down and pulling across. You know, that's what you're doing. You're moving the what you call it, the paint. Well, it's paint, but you know, it's really powder, colored powder that's with it could be with oil, it could be what acrylic is made out of. But anyone who's painted, you know there are different types of paints and reactive oils, you know, move around a lot. Acrylics are difficult because they seem to dry fast. You know, they're very unforgiving if you put the paint in the wrong place. Apparently oils are better. So whatever. Anyways, but you're basically just dragging this physical material with color in it across, you know, the side of the cave. If you're a caveman, you're painting on the side of the wall, or what you call it, the palette, not the palette. What do you call it? What do you call the thing that you paint on? Not the palette. Is it palette? Oh, big white thing. Canvas. Thank you. Could not remember that. Anyways, well, I'm old. Right? Tier 0 18s. The canvas. So yeah, I guess I'm assuming that's where the idea is coming from in drawing or dragon or dryon, however they pronounced it in Old English, of dragging something across or pulling it. You're pulling the color, pulling the image, or pulling the line of the image. So it's an act that produces an image or a likeness. Fancy way of saying a picture, I guess. By means of making lines on the surface. Yeah, lines. You're dealing with lines in drawing. Basically, that's what's going on. You're making lines. Straight lines, curved lines, broken lines, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, you're making an image out of various lines. Very simple image, like just drawing a stick figure, or a very complicated image where you're sitting there sketching someone's face or a person sitting there, okay? But still, ultimately, you're just making an image, a reproduction with lines. So humans have been drawing pictures before that for thousands of years, even longer than we've been writing. Longer than we've been writing. So we have evidence of this because it seems like humans first expressed themselves through pictures. At least that's what archaeologists seem to find when they find, you know, evidence of human habitation. They don't find usually writing on the wall. They find people have drawn pictures of things. And the earliest datable picture that we found, there could be earlier ones we haven't found yet, but the earliest datable pictures that we have is this up here, which was found on the side of, I guess, a cave or something in Indonesia, the country of Indonesia. over in Asia, Southeast Asia. And this is, you can see this is what it looks like actually, and then this is what you can kind of make out of what the pictures are. This is, it's broken up, so it's not complete, because it's big as, tens of thousands of years old. But this is a pig, it seems to be, a picture of a pig and another pig. And I lived in Papua New Guinea, which is right, well, it borders Indonesia. Pigs are big, pigs are big. No, but poetry just flows. But they're a major element, at least of Papua New Guinean culture, but they seem to be a big part of those cultures. So I'm not surprised that they're drawing pigs. This could be, some of them you can't tell. This could be a human, that could be an animal. That seems to be an anoa, which is a type of animal from the area. I don't know what an anoa is. I have to look it up on the internet for a picture, but some type of local animal. Okay, and where is it? I said Indonesia, but where is that? Let me show you. Oh, actually, I do have a map here, but I'll use Google. It doesn't matter. Yeah, right. Buy it. Good neighbors don't pester me to buy stuff all the time. All right. There we go. All righty. Okay, so we move out to we're going to go west to go to the east. Here's Southeast Asia. Okay, because this is the continent of Asia. So south is bottom and east. And here we have two countries. Indonesia is here, and a country here that's Malaysia. Actually, a number of countries here. There's also Singapore. There's also Brunei, Timor-Leste. Here's Papua New Guinea, where I was living for 9 months. See, it borders Indonesia right there. Okay, so a bunch of islands, an archipelago, I guess they would say. A bunch of large islands make up this country of Indonesia, right above Australia. And that's where archaeologists discovered what appears to be the earliest pictures. They dated about 50,000 years ago. 50,000 years ago. Okay, so clearly much earlier than human writing, which is only around 5,000 some years ago. So, by like 40,000 years, or actually 51, to be more specific, around 51,000 years ago, let me say that, these pictures are dated. Why do I have that on there as well? Put that on. Hopefully it's in my notes. Anyways. So pictures served as visual expressions of a person's idea, okay? We're assuming that they're getting this right. I mean, I guess that looks like a pig. I guess that's a pig. I guess that's a Noah, if you know what an Noah looks like from that area. I'm not, and someone there, I guess, so again, you're dealing with the mental stuff. Remember Aristotle, you're dealing with concepts in the mind first, not just, what do you think a pig looks like? How would you represent a pig on a drawing? Do you draw the pig from the side? Do you draw it from straight ahead with its face, or from its back, its tail, its butt? How you have to decide, how is it going to look? This person decided to do it apparently from the side, and there's the snout and the legs. Again, assuming, because as a picture, Mr. McMaster, I can't ask the picture drawer what it is. It's just there. If it were a writing, if he wrote under this, or she wrote under this, in whatever language they were speaking 51,000 years ago on some island in Indonesia, pig, what was their word for pig? And I could read it, decipher it. That gives me information, that tells me what it is. So it's a visual expression of my idea, even of what I think, I guess, a pig is. We're assuming these archaeologists or paleontologists who discovered these things, they have to make that assumption that 50 some thousand years later, they can get into the mind of some human being and what that person was trying to convey from his or her mind through this picture. If it is in Ms. Quesada is a picture and not just someone throwing paint up against the wall. It's not a Jackson Pollock painting. You know Jackson Pollock, ever seen his painting? They look like accidents. They look like an accident happened, like a person spilled a bunch of paint cans on a canvas. The guy's famous. I don't get it. I don't get it. But anyways, that's probably because I'm not famous with Sniper. So if it were my work, I'd be like, oh yes. But as we know, pictures are largely independent of speech, which can express our ideas in auditory form. Okay. So scholars theorize from this evidence like this that most, if not all, scripts probably trace their lineage back directly or indirectly to some form of picture writing that then developed, from the actual picture close to what the thing kind of looks like to then more symbolic stuff. Mr. Jastrzemski, what am I going to do with you? What's going on, sir? The Eagles win on Thursday. They won, right? They came back. They did. Oh, okay. So I guess we're happy with that. I was watching our ladies soccer team the other day on the streaming online, playing Lancaster Bible College, right, Miss Senior? Is she with me? Are you with me, Miss Senior? Did you get to play? Were you on the field? Because I thought I might have seen you. You're in like midfield, right? Or in the back. You were playing up top? Oh, maybe I missed you then. Thought I saw you. I was looking for you. The time I saw you, we were down 1-0, but did anything happen? I didn't see the rest of the game. I watched for a few minutes and I went back to what I was doing, but did we even it up at all, or?
They scored.
So you tied it up in the darn it. All right, Miss Senior. Maybe I have to intervene. Maybe I have to get interdisciplinary, Miss Jewel, Miss Crystal. Help you out. Maybe we'll do some shuttle runs. Start doing shuttle runs in class. No? No shuttle runs? I'm just trying to help out. Anyways. Yeah, that was cool. And men are the men's soccer, is men's soccer playing Mr. Jastrzemski anytime soon?
Yeah, we played last night. And we played them on.
How'd you do?
Last night we won 4-1.
Oh, 4-1. Against whom?
I see Randy won.
Oh, Penn State Brandywine. Ooh. Interesting. Well, that's nice. You see how things develop. Oh, I guess I did put it in my notes. So it has been suggested. Do I want to mention that or move on? I might just move on from this. This is Sumerian. It's proto-writing. It's an example of proto-writing. It's not quite writing. It's still more pictures than writing. These are like tokens and used mainly for record keeping. I'm not sure. Let me go to my next slide and see. Okay, so I didn't. Yeah. But, yeah, they found these things like Sumeria, which we'll find out in a moment, is modern day Iraq, the country of Iraq. We'll see it on a map in a moment. But they found these things that, as I said, they're not quite writing. They're like pictures that are drawn into clay, usually for record keeping purposes. Because they wanted to, like if I'm, doing business with you and I give you 3 sheep, or 300 sheep, how do we remember that? If we're making like a contract, like I'm going to give you X amount of sheep and you'll give me whatever, like bartering, like you'll give me X pounds of grain in return or something like that, or money or whatever. But how do we establish that? You know, how do I prove, you know, hey, I gave you the sheep? Or how do I prove that I gave you the money for the sheep? How do you, so that was an issue even tens of thousands of years ago. So how do you prove that? So they would, you know, take little, you know, soft clay, and they would like put indentations, Mr. Jastrzemski, into the clay to represent something, to represent sheep, something to usually drawing a picture of sheep, and then something to represent a number like 300 or 3 or whatever, and then, you know, whose it was, something to represent the person and stuff like that. And you would, you know, save these things, you know, you might even break them in half, and half would go to the person that you're, you know, half to you, but half of the contract would be physically given to the other person that you've entered into the agreement with. Okay, and some, it's, as I said, it's proto writing. It was more still drawing pictures than writing stuff out, but you can see how easily that might become from pictures to symbols, you know, where the picture of the sheep becomes to mean the word sheep, or can mean even something more general like an animal, you know, stuff like that. So I just, you know, I thought this was interesting, so I put it up here. As an, as, I think you're like the only one listening to me. I lost it. I don't know. I think Jastrzemski's placing bets. I still get 5%, Mr. Jastrzemski. I want my 5%. Okay. So here's a map of the 4 areas in which writing developed at different times. Huh, that's interesting. Yeah, Kolmas says in his article or chapter that, you know, he notes the fact that pictures, this wasn't a natural development. Pictures don't naturally become writing. There had to be a conceptual transformation. Something had to happen. What? I'm not sure we can know. It's just simply lost to history. But somewhere along the line, somebody figured out that you could turn a picture into a visual sign, and then the sign could become like the word that you're speaking for that thing, whatever that is. It can now represent your language, the language you're speaking. And so, yeah, it seems like writing was more of a pragmatic thing, you know, keeping track of stuff. I mentioned the example of, you know, if I sell you X amount of sheep and you pay me, how do we prove this? Just pragmatic business affairs. Also for religion. Religion, of course, is big. You know, contracts, religious stuff. A lot of early writing and stuff like that has to do with astronomy, because people believed that the stars and the planets were divine beings or entities in some way, and how they moved through the sky gave an indication of maybe future events or things that were happening on Earth. That was the assumption. So, of course, the movement of these bodies was very important to a lot of ancient cultures in the Middle East and North America, Central America, all throughout. Human beings were looking up at the stars and the galaxies and, you know, wondering why, noticing that some stayed in their place and others moved, wondering why, noting these movements, how often they happen, when they happen. And so but you needed a symbolic system to represent that. Writing. So whenever writing began, true writing began or begins when a person somewhere, who knows who it was, learned how to communicate his or her thoughts and feelings by visible signs. These visible signs were not only understandable to himself or herself, but to the other person who knew the system, who spoke the language. As we saw from that cave drawing, a picture of an Anoa means nothing to me, because I'm not from Indonesia. As far as I know, I've never seen an Anoa animal. Looked almost like a little deer or something. I'm assuming, because I know what a little deer looks like. But I don't know what an Anoa looks like. I have to extrapolate. And that's what's going on with pictures. But in a writing system, someone found out that I could communicate clearly. Someone who knows the word that I'm thinking of and I'm writing down, it's now understandable to them. Like if the person had written pig under pig, and I speak the language and I know the symbol system for representing the sounds of the language, that helps me out. But if I've never seen a pig, then a picture doesn't help me very much. Show you a picture. Look at this. What do you think this is? Do it all the time. You find something weird on the internet. What do you think this is? Do you think this is Photoshop? Weird looking thing. Oh, I know what that is. So writing came about to depict both ideas and speech, mental concepts and language. Drawing is for depiction. Pictures are for depiction. They're depicting something. But writing is for communication. It's for communication. Even when you're reading a book, what's going on is that the book, the letters of the words are communicating to you, and then your brain is depicting, yes? It's creating images in your mind. That's why you can have a book about something that's totally unreal, like a science fiction book, or, zombie apocalypse, or, doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to, the characters are not in fiction. They're not real people. They don't really exist. As if you've seen the talk by Karen Armstrong, that's on YouTube, that hopefully you'll watch eventually, because I think you have to write about it in your paper. She opens up by talking about Jane Austen's book, Pride and Prejudice. I don't know if anyone saw the miniseries, or there's a movie about it. I saw the miniseries with Mr. Darcy and, all these things. Stuff like that. Anyone ever have to read it in Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice? No Jane Austen? Okay. Well, you can watch the movies, and the movies, I think, give you the feel for what the books are like. It's basically romance, in the 1800s, or the early 1800s, some young woman's views of romance and relationships. So if you like that kind of stuff, it's basically, what would you call it from the 90s? You wouldn't know this, but I'm thinking about it because they're bringing it back. They're doing it. I guess the actors had nothing better to do. What was it called? Begins with an M. Not coming to me. Well, Dawson's Creek. I don't know if anyone can remember Dawson's Creek. Well, they don't remember it, but if you've seen it on Netflix or something, Dawson's Creek from the 90s. Relationships. It's all they're doing is talking about relationships. And then they screw up relationships to make it interesting. Gilmore Girls, that's it. Gilmore Girls. Bringing Gilmore Girls back. I didn't watch one episode of Gilmore Girls in the 90s when it was on, and I have no intention of watching it as they reboot it. But anyways, it's kind of a sophisticated version of, say, Gilmore Girls or Dawson's Creek, Jane Austen's books. Okay, but that's the reference that Karen Armstrong makes at the beginning of her talk. She's like, if you're reading Pride and Prejudice and, reading about Mr. Darcy or the lady, I forget what her name is, Elizabeth, I think, but whatever, and their relationship, and will they get together, won't they get together? First she hates, Darcy, then she loves him, spoiler alert, of course they're going to get together because it's a romance. But anyways, you don't care that they don't exist. If someone told you, well, this is just a fiction, Jane Austen, this English lady, came up with these stories in her head and she wrote them down. You don't feel scandalized by that, or it doesn't shake your faith in humanity or God or something. Oh, Mr. Darcy, there really was no Mr. Darcy ever at all. It's fiction, but you create, how do you get invested? Think of this ties in with sacred writings. How do you get invested with these characters who aren't real? Because the words communicate to you and they create the images in your mind. You start creating this reality in your mind. Like you're walking the streets, the dusty roads of Galilee with Jesus and the apostles. Almost imagine yourself there. Or, in the case of, say, Jane Austen, or any other kind of book, like you're there. You're there during the zombie apocalypse. You know, you can imagine in your mind creates all these images that aren't real as well, and you know they're not real. So why do they create emotions in you? Anyone read Where the Red Fern Grows? You have to read Where the Red Fern Grows? Nobody? No. On the Beach? No? Silas Marner? Well, these are the things I had to read when I was in high school. I mean, I bawled like a baby when I came to the end of Where the Red Fern Grows. It was one of the saddest endings. I still get choked up as Taylor when I think about what happens in it. Because then it brings me back to the meaning of the title of the book, Where the Red Fern Grows. When you understand why it's entitled Where the Red Fern Grows, why that's the title, it's like, it makes it even worse, even sadder. Oh, I cried and cried and cried. But it's a book. It's fiction. I knew it was fiction. But it created these images. It communicated, but it created depictions, pictures. Maybe I'm onto something there. This unity, maybe we still have that unity, the coming together of the pictures and writing. Maybe it makes the pictures more powerful. I don't know. Anyways, but once pictures were linked conventionally, once people started linking pictures with linguistic interpretation, language, that's laying the foundation for writing per se. And where does this occur? We see humans doing this in a few areas of the world, some independently, some not. I showed you an example of proto-writing from those Sumerian little tablets, okay, which were more pictures than writing. They don't seem to be words in any sort. They're just memory symbols. People want to remember how many animals they gave and how many they bought. They don't really fully record the spoken language. They record the idea. And so these are proto-writing. It's very hard to interpret what it means. True writing is where the content of speech is accurately reconstructed for the reader. So, I don't need to know what a pig looks like to know that, okay, Shlomo bought 300 pigs from Yitzchak, in ancient Israel or something, because I can read the words. Now, where did true writing originate originally, Mr. Seraphin? Well, the Middle East, what we call the Middle East. Someone who lives in the Middle East might say, well, east of what? Yeah, because if you're in the Middle East, then the Middle East is like India or China. That's the East. What are we east of? Ever ask yourself that? Yes. Why are we the West? Usually America is lumped in with the West. What are we west of? So first we have Mesopotamia, around 3,500 BC. Then we have Egypt. Then we have China. And then finally we have Mesoamerica. So scholars think, the archaeology suggests that true writing developed here, what's called the area between the rivers. There are two big rivers here called Tigris and Euphrates rivers that flow down into the Persian Gulf. Okay? And so Potamos, I think it's in Greek, means a river. Meso means middle. Those of you who are taking sciences, your health sciences, meso. Means middle in Greek, so that's what it means. They use it in the health sciences. I'm sure you've all seen commercials for mesothelioma all over the place, asking you to hop on board to sue somebody, the government, I guess, or something for asbestos. But it causes mesothelioma. Which I don't know what mesothelioma is, but I do know it's in the middle of something, Mr. Barnett. The middle of something in the body. So between the rivers, Mesopotamia, which we could just generally say is modern day Iraq. Okay, so 3,000, sometime between 3,500 to 3,100 BC, it developed. And then probably spread to Egypt. There was probably, it spread over to Egypt, which makes sense. There's a land bridge here. Okay, so then we have Egypt around 3250 BC, adopted a very different writing system, but just see, it pops up there. So a lot of scholars think that Sumeriologists, those who study this ancient Sumer, this civilization that was there, one of the earliest civilizations in history, Sumer, that the Egyptians were influenced by that. Maybe not. Maybe directly, well, they still debate. Egyptologists want to say that Egypt actually got there first and Sumer copied them, but it doesn't seem to. It seems that it happened first in Mesopotamia and then filtered out to Egypt. But then independently of that area of the world, we have China. Over here in China, around 1250 BC, we have evidence of Chinese writing. And if you believe Chinese archaeologists, they found stuff all the way out like here in Tajikistan, one of the Stan countries, Tajikistan or Kyrgyzstan or something. They're claiming to have found examples of Chinese writing that push it back even farther, maybe closer, maybe before the Sumerians. But you take it with a grain of salt because everything dealing with China, the government is always involved in some way, and they're very nationalistic. So it'll be great for them to say that, yeah, we developed writing first before everyone. So you always have to be a little bit suspicious of their data. Most scholars seem comfortable with 1250 BC. And then on the other side of the world, actually, quite literally on the other side of our planet, we have the middle of America. We call Central America, but Mesoamerica, the middle of the Americas, North and South America, of Central America, mainly southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize. Independently, human beings developed a writing system there. Now, it used to be in the old days, like the 1800s, when, linguistics and stuff like that was still an early science. The assumption was from the 1800s around about to the 1950s of the last century, that there was a single origin to writing, that they thought that it happened in one location and then spread out to the rest of the world. Which is called the monogenetic theory. Gene, genea, and Latin, or Greek and Latin. In Greek means, it means origin, but, the basis of your genes, your basis of something. But monogenetic, monos means one, so there was one origin for human language, okay? And, a lot of scholars assumed, as it turned out correctly, but for the wrong reasons, that it was probably in the Middle East where writing developed and then spread out. Now, why was it for the wrong reasons? Because of the Bible, not because of any evidence, really, archaeological evidence or linguistic evidence. They just, they took for fact the story in the Bible that apparently it's set in the Middle East. The Garden of Eden was in the Middle East. Adam and Eve, our first parents, were in the Middle East. We're assuming. Could have been Missouri, Miss Taylor. Could have been Missouri, Miss Harrison. You never know. Garden of Eden. That's what Joseph Smith Jr. said. Garden of Eden was in Missouri. founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mormons, but they don't want to be called Mormons anymore. Yes. God bless. So they're assuming a Middle Eastern setting for the Garden of Eden, where humans first emerged. And so that kind of influenced this monogenetic idea. But once evidence started to come in, started to become clear that the monogenetic theory was wrong. It couldn't bear the weight of the evidence. Even though they were right, technically, the evidence did bear out the fact that it was probably the Sumerian civilization in the 3000s that did develop the first true writing system. And then it did spread out probably to Egypt, although Egyptologists will still fight to the death saying that no, the Egyptians came up with it first, or they came up with it independently with no influence, but whatever. But by the 1950s and after, there was just evidence of different writing systems appearing in the record in Asia and then in the Americas and Central America. Well, how did that happen? So monogeneticism is no longer a viable theory amongst most linguists. Everything points to the fact that, and Kolmas says this in his chapter, that writing came about independently or semi-independently in the case of the Egyptians, but certainly in the case of China and Mesoamerica came out independently of other cultures. The Chinese did not, as far as we can tell, they did not get it from Sumeria. And clearly the Native Americans in Central America didn't get it from Asia or Africa, because of course they're separated from it, unless something happened. A bunch of Egyptians, ended up, on the coast of Brazil or something, blown off course at sea. I don't know. And they brought their language with, I don't know. Well, I do know because it's not even related to Egyptian. But so the general consensus is that yes, writing did develop in the ancient Near East and modern day Iraq. It started independently on a finite number of occasions. In these 4 areas, it was invented, I already told you. And so we have cuneiform we'll talk about. I've already mentioned cuneiform, but now I'll mention hieroglyphics in Egypt. And we'll start with the first, what is believed to be the earliest form, which is in Sumer in Mesopotamia. This called the Sumerian Empire. It's not much of an empire, but most of a large chunk of southern Iraq was ruled by, really it's a city-state, huge city, Sumer, and then the suburbs, the surrounding area was ruled by or dominated by the city. Now, it's interesting because if you look at this map, it's all the way back here. I wonder why that is. Well, that's because the ocean was different. This is where they found all their stuff, but the Persian Gulf went all the way up to the border here. That's where the Persian Gulf, the shoreline was. It was all the way up there. There was more water in the ocean. Where did it all go? Oh, we have ice ages, and that ties up some of the water, but the earth is constantly changing. The levels of the sea rise and they fall, Fortunately, there doesn't seem to be much we can do about that, except go hysterical. But the Persian Gulf apparently was a lot bigger here in this area than it was at least 5,000 some years ago. And now the water has receded down to here. Okay, so it's far away from where it originally was with the Sumerian. So, the Sumerian Empire was on water, it was on the ocean. At least had seafront. And they developed what I showed you was cuneiform. I already showed you an example of this as an example of, kind of an ideographic. Really, they're pictures. It's a picture form of writing where they take a cuneus, it's called a cuneus from Latin, which means wedge, as I told you, a wedge-shaped piece of tool or a piece of wood, probably a piece of wood with a wedge shape. You can see it in the way that it's written. and then you press the wedge in different directions and different combinations into wet clay. And then the clay will dry and harden, and the wedge will be there. So that's why it's called cuneiform, in the form of a wedge, a cuneus, a kind of writing that uses wedge-shaped characters. And we find this all over the place. I mean, the origins of Mesopotamian cuneiform are well documented. We have a wealth of clay tablets. I mean, that's one good thing about, I guess, clay than, say, paper or parchment. Parchment is more not sensitive. What's the word I'm looking for? Fragile than clay. Of course, clay can be smashed. Yeah, it can be broken apart. And a lot of times that's what you find. You find cuneiform tablets that are in pieces that have to be reconstructed. But they're more likely, apparently, to get through the passing of the decades and the centuries than, say, a piece of paper or parchment, which can degrade, based on the weather conditions and stuff like that. If it's really dry, then you're good to go. But if it's a wet climate and stuff rots, and disintegrates, whereas the clay still stays clay. So anyways, cuneiform, primarily used for accounting and also the administration of the temple in the ancient world. Like Sumer, you had, the city, and the center of the city was like almost a huge pyramid type structure, which would be the temple to the main god of the city, called a ziggurat. But don't worry about that. I'm not going to hold you to that. Maybe you've come across that term in your journeys. The ziggurat was kind of like a temple, a pyramid temple. And so, you had to keep track of, donations that were made by people, money that people might give for the sacrifices, or just, to do up the temple. And so you need counting. So we find in the beginning there are what we might call crude pictures, pressed or scratched into the wet clay, just pictures of natural objects, cattle, a bushel of wheat. But then what you see is writing is born because these pictures pressed into the clay start to be given linguistic value, a linguistic interpretation. And scholars think this happened maybe around 3200 BC. So, again, pictures are the root of writing. Starts with pictures, but then these pictures represent the language. And it's no longer just pictures anymore, but the pictures are representing words, and they're representing grammatical constructions and stuff like that. Okay? Written out. Egypt is fascinating because writing just appears in Egypt, full form. In Sumer, you kind of see the development. You have evidence of proto-writing, and then you can see how it develops into true writing. You can kind of map its growth. Egypt, no, it just, boom, it's there. They just have a writing system, a fully formed writing system. No one knows where they got it from. They assume influence from Sumer, but it doesn't look anything like Sumerian writing. And it's very, very different. It's not taking a piece of wood and with a wedge and pressing lines into clay. It's all sorts of symbols and pictures and all sorts of things. Very different. Where am I? Oh, it's Mesoamerica. I'm in Egypt. And so it's called differently. It's also an ideographic system where it's using pictures. It's pictorial writing. And it's called hieroglyphics, from two words in Greek, hieros, which means sacred or holy. So you can immediately see the religious connotation. It's a very big part of the religious practice, this writing system. And glypho in Greek, which means to carve. So remember, when we get back to writing from Proto-Indo-European, a lot of linguists think that's probably the most basic meaning of the term for writing, which is to carve something, to scratch. So sacred carvings, sacred scratchings, you might say. And again, just like with Sumer, it starts in pictures. I think it's very clear You can see it with this example of hieroglyphics. You know, here's a picture of an owl. I think it's an owl. I'm assuming it's a bird of some sort because it has wings. Though who knows? It could be a bat. You know, I'm assuming it's a bird of some sort. It looks like an owl to me. This just looks like a bird. This looks like a human figure that's on its knees or bowing down or something. This looks like a human eye. What else, Jack? Well, we've got other symbols here that I don't know what they are. This looks like a man sitting on something, holding something as well. I don't know. Is he a king? A royal figure? An authority figure? Holding like a staff or mace? I don't know. Yeah, and these other stuff, no clue. They're just symbols to me. I don't know what they're supposed to be. Well, I know now. I know because we have a translation here. God bless you. All right. Some people know, smarter than I. She's assuming that I'm smart and saying they're smarter. I shouldn't make that assumption. Anyways, so clearly, again, this idea or this development from pictures into language, into writing, happened, is evident there. And as I said, you know, Egyptian hieroglyphics are an enigma to scholars because it just appears. There's no primitive stage. It's just there, so we don't know where they got it from. I don't know if you ever watched Stargate. Ever seen the movie Stargate with Kurt Russell? Stargate? What? Should people have like streaming, Hulu, Paramount Plus? What's going on with you people? Good Lord. You have the resources, you just don't use them, Mr. Barnett. All right, I mentioned that. Not going to worry about that. Anything more I want to say about that? Well, all right. Hieroglyphics, yes. Picture writing used in Egypt. Glyph, any type of symbol or character that has been carved into an object. Okay, so no, that's different from cuneiform, where you're pressing wedges. This is where you're carving a symbol or character, an actual picture. Okay, so this is an example of, they got from the book, E.A. Wallace Budge, a woman, Cleopatra's Needles and other Egyptian obelisks. Yes, it's in the public domain, but she copied, I guess she went to Egypt and she copied down some of the hieroglyphics and then made translations of them. But anyways, so this is, you know, in some ways you can figure this out yourself once you know the translation, because we have the writing, right? We have the writing in English. I watched over the erection of two obelisks. An obelisk is a big stone monument with writing on it, okay? So I watched the erection. They lifted up two obelisks, so two great or large obelisks, at the double door of the god's house, in other words, the temple, in stone of granite. So whoever wrote this is talking about, you know, eyewitness fish for a construction project. It's that simple, you know? You're driving here and you see them digging up the road, same diff. Put up two big monuments in front of the temple. Okay? And can we maybe, okay, well, same thing. I watched over and I watched over, so you can see they're exactly the same. I'm just trying to see if, okay, apparently the owl has the meaning of in, symbol of the owl, means the word in. Splendid, that looks like it's a combination of symbols, though. It's a person, then something like a staff, it looks like. I don't know what these are, but it seems like, yeah, maybe for more complicated or, you know, more complicated ideas, you have to combine other things. Transport, so you have a person with a paddle, and you have an image of the waves of water. Okay, so you're, you know, taking something across the water. Sure makes sense for Egypt because the Nile River was the main source of transport up and down throughout the country and nation. So that will be their conception of what transportation is. We might draw a road rather than water. So we live in a different context. Okay, so hieroglyphs. Now, over in China, about what, 2,000 years later? We don't know where writing came from in China. We do know it comes from pictures. Again, pictures. So we're uncertain about the origin of it, but it does have something, it does have a religious purpose. Again, religion. You can't get away from it. It's a part of human life. Okay? Oracle bones. What's an oracle bone? Well, an oracle from Latin comes from oro, which is the Latin word to, well, used to pray, but here to argue or ask for something, to entreat. So make an argument or ask, like, and to pray, you know. So an oration is sometimes another word for prayer. You're asking the God, you're trying to convince the God to do something for you, Ms. Quesada. And he'll throw a sacrifice the way of the God. If you really need it, you know. But an oraculum is an announcement from a God. Okay, a prophecy, yes. Another synonym is prophecy, but it's an announcement. You receive an announcement from a message, basically. Oracle, it's a religious message, a spiritual message from a God. Universe. Oracle bones. Okay, so an oracle is something through which divine or hidden knowledge is revealed. So you can kind of extrapolate, Ms. Senior, what an oracle bone might be. Well, maybe not. It's very hot. Ladies want to be very hot. Because remember, they had that lady there. Remember Hermione hated her. She thought, you know, the lady who was like the savant, the crystal ball and stuff. Hermione thought that was like, that wasn't real magic. They had him, she had him look in the cup to see the tea leaves. Oh, you've got the cream. Well, it's a similar type of idea. You know, you take a bunch of bones, okay, you write symbols on them, or words. The shaman, or the spiritual person, someone you think has contact with the gods, the spirits, throws them on the ground, then you have to interpret how they fall. You see if there's a message there. An oracle from the God or the spirit, by how they I guess they combine together. Okay, so we found these things. Okay, and we found the writing on them. Clearly pictures, but not just meant to be pictures. They mean things as well. Okay, so we see here this picture of early Chinese writing. Okay, picture of pictures. This image of early Chinese writing. See if I have anything in my notes about it. I don't think I do. Nevertheless, it gives you an idea of what this kind of stuff looked like. Which then develops, like, you know, into words. They mean words and they come together as sentences and stuff like that, these pictures. Very clearly picture writing, just like Egyptians very clearly. Once you see like cuneiform or something like that, you start seeing it's different. Okay? So here's just an image I got from a book. That I just thought was interesting. It shows the development from the pictures to the words, to letters, stuff like that, and how it happens, or how it seems to have happened. So, for example, in early cuneiform, a fish looks very much like the picture of a fish with fins and a fish shape. But then it develops into these wedges, which kind of approximate the original picture, but not so much as you know it immediately, and it becomes the word for a fish. Cuneiform, clearly a picture of a fish. And very obvious as opposed to the Sumerian form. But then, you maybe don't want to carve all of this. You get a simpler form, and then it just becomes like this squiggle, which means fish. It becomes a symbol for fish. Same thing with Chinese. It looks very much like a fish, but as it develops throughout history, it becomes, I guess it's on its side, it's turned on its side, and you can kind of see the fins and stuff become these little, dots or dashes at the bottom, okay? And really doesn't look anything like a fish to me. Doesn't suggest fish at all. So it's not a picture anymore of anything. It's not a picture. It's not trying to be a picture. Something has changed. It's now writing and not a picture. Okay, Mesoamerica. Sometime before 500 BC. Okay, sometime before that's really the best we can say about Central America. Sometime before 500 BC. Is the Zapoteca is sure. The earliest inscriptions we have are from the Zapotec. See there? From central Mexico, the modern day country of Mexico, the Zapotec. And there are monuments with these inscriptions that date from around the 500s BC. I don't know, I don't have it in my notes, but if I remember, I don't think scholars have been able to necessarily decipher them yet, but they know it's writing. It just has, they have this hunch, a good hunch that this is writing. It's not just pictures, okay? And if you want to see any Zapotec, there they are. They're still with us, Mr. Lebedinsky. I think this is a Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall, but regardless, it doesn't matter. A couple of little Zapotec children. They're still around. You didn't get rid of them. They're still there. People think the Native Americans went away or we put them on reservations. Well, they're still there. Maybe you don't encounter them so much in North America where we have put them on reservations, a lot of them. But I mean, once you go south of the border, baby, from Mexico all the way down to the tip of Argentina and Chile, test the DNA. They're Asian. They're not Hispanic. They're not from Spain. Most of the people now there's a lot of mixture with Hispanic DNA from the Spanish and the Portuguese from having colonized, but still, I mean, their genes are probably, if you tested them, Asian, from Eastern Asia. They're still there, just because they speak Spanish and it doesn't necessarily make them Hispanic. Things are more complicated. So the Zapotec might have the credit with having developed this kind of glyph system. They also call these glyphs because they're usually carved into stone. They're symbols that are carved into stone and they mean words. So they're also called glyphs. They're not hieroglyphs, just glyphs. And the ones that we've been able to interpret come from the Maya, who live in who center around modern-day Guatemala, the country of Guatemala. So very southern Mexico, Guatemala, parts of Belize. And as the earliest that scholars can date their glyphs are to the 200s BC. So a little over about 2,000 years ago, we have the development of writing in Central America. And really Maya, the Zapotec may be the first. There's evidence they think so. But really, Maya is the only Native American writing system that has been deciphered. And one of the few that's been developed. Writing didn't really develop anywhere else, it seems, outside of Central America. Didn't catch on for some reason. And it took them I watched a whole documentary, I think it was on PBS. But I watched a whole documentary about the eventual decipherment of Maya. It's fascinating how they, over years and decades and stuff, of trying to decipher this very complicated writing system. Because, and even now, even though they've kind of deciphered a lot of it, most of it, there's still the meaning of sounds behind the symbols is not always understood. Okay, so most Mayan writing can be pronounced, this ancient writing can be pronounced, and the majority of it can now be understood. But when I was growing up, like I was born in 1972, not really. That's how the field has changed dramatically because they were still trying to maybe figure out some things, but they still couldn't read. They knew it was writing, but they couldn't figure out what it was meant to say. But now they can understand most of it. They recognize that it's logogrammic. Okay, so pictures of ideas, but it's also syllabic. Okay, the glyphs represent syllables, and it's very complex. The glyphs will change based on which syllables are there, which vowels and consonants are put together, and stuff like that. So, and there was no kind of standardization. Apparently, people could represent the same glyph in different ways, similar ways, but different enough to make you like want to go crazy. You're checking out on me, Miss Taylor. You ready to go? Miss Taylor is telling me that the referee's blowing her whistle, right? All right. See you on Thursday. Yes.
Sure. It's a good day, sir.
Have a good day, sir. Thank you.
Everyone.
Have a good day, sir. Have a good day, sir.
Yeah.
Good to see you, sir.
Good day.
Have a good day. Goodness. Okay. That's repetitive. Why am I? Have a good day. Have a good day, sir. You're welcome. Oh, Ms. Mackerlin, did you get my email? Okay, so did you email me back?
Actually,
Okay. All right, well, email me back and let me know. You're welcome. Oh, want to get in here quickly.
when's our next, like, when?
Huh? Read the syllabus, please. I didn't tell you. I don't remember telling you. Why would I tell you? All right. Well, I'm telling you now, read the syllabus, please. It's all there.
Sure.